to the Philip K. Dick More Human Than Human. Some of you may have watched an episode I did a couple hours back. And this is a retort to some people who emailed me or text me in the chat about my interpretation of what happened to PKD in 2374. I often don't appreciate when people just hide behind words without backing up their sources. So amongst the things they mention is that, well, PKD had an epileptic seizure, and that's why he had these visions. That same person, by the way, a week ago suggested that I explore Carl Jung's experience and compare it to PKD. So it seems that this PKD scholar really doesn't know what he's talking about. Yes, maybe PKD, he had an epileptic seizure, frontal lobe, temporal lobe epilepsy. But so what? I'm going to just right now in a second, this is going to be essentially an explanation not to confuse the experience or the message with the process, which seems to be a really common thing, especially with academics today. But let's do this for a second. I'm going to here present, share screen. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to be pulling up some of the people that have had epileptic seizures. Well, let's start with Joan of Arc. She claimed to have a vision or hearing from God. And based upon that information, she went ahead and decided her mission was to help the French. Now, in retrospect, the haters or pundits or intellectual quote-unquote scholars are saying, well, she had temporal lobe epilepsy. And most likely she was hearing voices from that side of the brain. Very nice. Napoleon Bonaparte. The evidence shows that Napoleon had both psychogenic and epileptic attacks related to the tremendous stress in his life. Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt suffered from epilepsy. Did this stop him from doing the things he had to do? Harriet Tubman, Charles Dickens. Let's not forget Julius Caesar. Let's not forget Paul of Tarsus. So it's true that Philip K. Dick may have had somatic issues, but I'm looking at the experience. So we can spend all day arguing about whether he was schizophrenic, or whether he had temporal lobe epilepsy, or whether or not he was a drug user. And that is absolutely meaningless. You want to look at the message. Because if we're to use that same kind of logic to say Paul of Tarsus, you are automatically discrediting 2,000 years of Christianity. Oh, well, Paul just was an epileptic and he thought he heard Jesus, but we all know that's not true. As if you are the authority on that. So keep that in mind. The same for Joan of Arc. Oh, well, she was hearing visions, and as a result, she couldn't she couldn't help the French if she hadn't had those visions. So let's look at the message instead of the structure. It's very commonplace today to attribute physiological analogs to people who have amazing experiences. And this is a big mistake. Just today I was reading that a retort to Robert Kennedy's idea that perhaps vaccines cause autism. So I don't have an answer one way or the other on that. But one thing I know, as someone who works in the mental health field, I work with vets. I work with schizoaffective people. I've worked with obsessive compulsive people. So I have some, you could say, a little bit of information on how to deal with them. And looking at Philip K. Dick, this is not someone who just had a schizophrenic breakdown, because the coherency of this thinking is what leads me to think he had an authentic mystical experience, which for some of you who are the haters out there think that it was very easy to dismiss the message. Let's look at someone like Julius Caesar. Now, you can dismiss the fact that he was an epileptic and perhaps even rationalize what he did afterwards. Oh, well, he was an epileptic. So a lot of people are now in the autistic spectrum. And perhaps that's why we have so many quote unquote cases of autism, right? Maybe it's a possibility. But it's very important not to be labeled. You're not a depressive, you're not a phobic, you're not massive. You have processes going inside your brain right now. For instance, I worked with a fellow a long time ago that, in fact, was had a drinking disorder. He had gone to AA and had said, "Oh well, I'm always I can't touch alcohol." And I said, "Well, that doesn't seem like a good choice, does it? I mean, you went from drinking massively to not drinking at all. How would you like to be able to touch the substance without necessarily being pulled by the substance?" That's what free choice is all about, people. Right? So consequently, I really could care less whether PKD was schizophrenic, had an epileptic fit, had temporal lobe, was agoraphobic, because I look at the man, not at those symptoms. Despite those symptoms, he made an amazing contribution to not the world of literature, but the world of philosophy. And part of our talk today was to indeed explore what Valis means. So a lot of people in the scholarly circle like to believe that PKD, they like to almost own PKD. No one owns PKD, right? Let's make it very clear. You can have an interpretation on what he did, but to go around trolling other people for who he is gives you an authority that you don't have. Now, the issue is this, that we have to really look at what he did. What is the Valis experience? Now, this particular fellow who was trolling me throughout suggested that, oh, well, it's paranormal mumbo jumbo. Oh, that's very nice. Well, let's start out with paranormal. Did you know, if you're watching, that the Parapsychological Association is an official science? And the study of anomalous phenomena, even though it might be annoying to some people, is part of parcel of a lot of work. If it's not a science, well, why don't you start out by discrediting the American Parapsychological Association? But let's move that for a second. Let's assume that indeed that's not an issue. What is the issue? I'm talking about autistic savants who have unusual powers. Well, I've worked with autistic savants, and they can look at at 10,000 matches, they can tell you exactly what is the number. How do you attribute that? How do you explain that? That's something we should all be asking, you know? Instead, we're focusing on the latest app or latest technology that will help us, support us. For instance, I just recently had an article, a friend of mine who said that there is a trend now in creating avatars where all this digitized information from your parents goes into the avatar. So afterwards, after your parents passed away, you can continue to have a good relationship with your parents. Or whatever happened to grief and closure? These are the issues that PKD talks about all the time, not just larger cosmic relationships between man and God or some Gnostic entity. But we're forgetting that. And what he would actually say is that many of people who are attacked and cannot accept the possibility of something outside the rigid cell, they're living in a black iron prison. I'm not saying that one of these processes, as someone who studied physics, who has studied biochemistry, I look at science and I look at control studies. I'm the last person who will start embracing a lot of this new age nonsense like crystal gazing and so on. That's not for me. But at the same time, you cannot throw the baby with the bathwater. And there are many people who are just very easy to dismiss. He's just a drug addict, a junkie. Well, in that case, why are you reading him? Because I'm telling you, PKD was a great vibe, but a lot of his writing is a little rough around the edges. It's like reading James Joyce, right? Any of you have read James Joyce, Ulysses? Okay, any of you? You know how difficult it is. You need to frame the reading before you actually read it. Otherwise, you'll think this guy's an idiot. Or Thomas Pynchon, that's another one. These are great writers, but by standard academic, or quote unquote standard academic, they're terrible. PKD is a difficult writer, but the way I approach PKD is his unconscious to my unconscious, because he wrote so quickly, the idea just came out of itself. They weren't clearly, methodically left brain picked one by one. A lot of writers do that, but it's a different kind of writing. The same with James Joyce, the same with Pynchon. By the way, other people who had PKD, who had epilepsy, was Socrates. So as you look at all these amazing figures in history and you start dismissing them because they had epilepsy, you're dismissing half of the greatest people in all history. You might as well run back to your cave and start thinking and keep staying in your black iron prison. The point of our festival is not just to show amazing films, but also take the philosophy of PKD to the next level. And I think that the Valis Experience 2374 is not a singular experience. For instance, a few years back, about a year or so ago, I fell asleep. And all of a sudden, I was in this dream world where there were temples everywhere. And then I looked at the sun, and then a beam from the sun hit me on the forehead. Now, does that mean I'm epileptic? No. It means there is a state of consciousness that moves. It's between left and right brain, or one mind and the other into the brain. And that's correct. It may not be a brain issue, it may be a mind issue. One mind versus the other. Any of you have heard Alfred North Whitehead, who have read Process and Reality, he talks about two kinds of minds. The presentational immediacy, which is the things we see in front of us, and the causal efficacy, which are more symbolic in nature, more the world of the unconscious. And if you start reading Alfred North Whitehead, a philosopher from the early 20th century, a contemporary of Bertrand Russell, you'll realize that he's talking the same thing as Ian McGilchrist. Ian McGilchrist talks about the right brain or right hemispheric function, how it tends to reality. So you may not be comfortable talking about brain structure, and I believe that the mind is outside the brain. But at the very least, you'll admit that there are two minds going on, not just one that does all the processing. You're unconscious. It's running your brain right now. It's running your heart. It's running your blood. When you cut, it knows how to heal itself. But the left brain, this is what Ian McGilchrist has been talking about, is in charge. It's a control freak. So I see a lot of people, especially come from academia, who are very rigid. And I would ask them to really, take some meditation, run, enjoy life. They're stuck, and there's literary intertextual interpretation of the meaning of things, and they get lost in this prison. Philip K. Dick said he left he left the black iron prison, at least probably temporarily, in 1974, and he was showing us the way. Other people have had similar experiences. So the goal of our work is not to just say, oh, he's the greatest. No, he's part of a pantheon of people who are pointing the way out of the black iron prison, which in my book is the left brain, the control freak, and it's being overstimulated. Whereas the right brain, which is a source of your presencing of bliss, it's like in the background. So if anything, I'm defending the right brain, not the wrong brain. So all brains have to work together. The mind and the brain need to work together. The point about the films that we do is to not just entertain you, but also to point to what's going to happen. There's a film that we put out last year called Creepbox. Those who were attended the festival at MOMI, it's essentially about a kind of a box that incorporates digital information of the person's memories, and once the other person passes away, this information then can be passed, and it's a kind of a grieving box, right? But the problem is it prevents a person from grieving. This very moment, Microsoft is working on avatars that will digitize information about your parents, and when your parents are gone, right? When they're gone, that you'll be able to talk with them again. So what happened to closure? What happened to move, just leaving, to just saying goodbye? That's part of the human condition, what PKD always talks about. So let's not get lost into this intertextual foreplay, and let's really get down to business. I'm here supporting PKD's vision because he stands for not just interesting sci-fi, but a vision that we need more than ever. Other sci-fi writers are great. I love Asimov, Heinlein, Bradbury. But in PKD, we find someone special, distinct, different. And this is the key. It's part of our ability to look beyond what's in front of you. And so the key is this. We need to move forward. Now, I want to finish with one last thing for that person who said, no, he didn't have a mystical experience. And he was all trolling, making all kind of innuendos about my background and so, which absolutely untrue. I work with people who are mentally ill. I've worked with people who are also have a background in physics. So I have a little bit thing to say about the nature of reality, or at least what I interpret as PKD's experience. Now, nobody owns it, right? So PKD's gone, and people are getting a sense of who he is. But at the end of the day, you really need to be on track. So I'm going to finish up with this one last thing, which is, let me see if I can track this, if I can go back here. Okay. I'm just going to read it to you. This is quote from the LA Times. It's after novels this is Jonathan Lethem, and also his daughter Laura. It is as if the novels were visions, Lethem said Monday night. He was preparing to be the writer of the exegesis from the very beginning. So if not, a novel is a collection of short stories. What is it exactly? There have been various hypotheses that the rupture was physical. The earliest and most common was that he had a temporal lobe epilepsy. Laura said, his daughter. He was clearly manic depressive, absolutely. I fairly became certain that he was having a series of small strokes, most likely. She acknowledged that he was a frequent use of amphetamines, absolutely. But she says, whatever it was a legitimate mystical experience. So I'm not sure who this troll is having a problem with mystical experiences. But whatever it is, I feel sorry because he's stuck in a black iron prison. The reason a lot of people have, I would say a lot of people have seek the antidepressants. I mean, a lot of the people, we're looking for ecstasy. The world is, if you go, I live in New York City, and you see the sorry faces of the people. They're stuck in a black iron prison. We need to get them out of that place. The only way is helping them. I can write a long literary book on PKD. That's nobody's going to read. But a movie, they might get them to think. Maybe explore other ways of dealing with the nature of reality. So regarding anyone who is, I have a challenge. If you want to debate me on PKD, whether or not he had a mystical experience, the challenge is on. Send me an email. I will debate you here in my channel, because I'm sick and tired of people saying he's a drug user, amphetamine user, and then they start reading PKD. Why are you reading him? If he's a drug user and he's no good, why are you reading him? Keep that in mind. A challenge is on, because I've heard it too many times with people who hide behind words. So if you want a challenge, I'll give you the challenge. We'll have a debate right here and let the public decide. Okay? So I'm very passionate about this. I'm not just a organizer of sci-fi films. My goal is to get the message out to everybody. And I'm very intense in protecting his image and his legacy, because it's more important than ever. So I thank you for showing here, and I hope that whoever wants to challenge, I'll challenge you, or any of you, because I do think that I'm protecting in my own way his legacy. Okay, so thank you for being here, and I will see you real soon. And by the way, on a lighter note, the festival is coming up in 2 weeks, April 4th through the 6th. We'll have a cosplay element. We'll have panels. There will be movies. There'll be one movie called the Jerba, which is based upon his short novel, The Piper in the Woods. So it'll be a lot of fun. We want to have fun, But at the same time, I don't shy when it comes to confrontation, especially with people who like to throw stones and little sticks and write behind words. So if you have something to say it. And let's say it in front of the group. We'll challenge you. We'll see what happens. Let the world know about this. Okay, but in the meantime, I want you guys to really have a good time. We have a festival coming. There'll be a lot of others. There'll be a good vibe. We have lots and lots of filmmakers from all over the world. And I'll be there in one of my costumes, making sure that everybody has a good time. So you have a good day and enjoy the evening. And hopefully there'll be more PKD talks. Because I have a feeling that a lot of people still don't know about this other side, the other side that he expressed. And again, at the end of the day, this is my opinion, right? But I'm backing it up with facts. I'm not just blurting it out. So you could believe that he had a temporal lobe epilepsy. Good, more power to you. Stay in that black iron prison because it's not fun. Sooner or later, it gets kind of lonely, So if you want to be, it's like the Plato's cave. You want to go out into the light, or maybe decide not to. Maybe I want to stay in the shadows. Yeah, maybe that's your goal. But our goal is to open minds and open hearts. And I hope that thank you for supporting me and really being there, because PKD would love this very moment we're having. Okay, so thank you, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.